Hello, Alderwood Church family. It's so good to see you again. I've been gone for a while and you haven't heard from me, but I had a restful vacation with my wife, Kay, and I'm so glad to be back with you. As I reflect back on this Justice Sermon series that we just finished, I've been really encouraged by the contribution of our guest speakers, Ricky Jenkins, Eugene Cho, and our panel with our own Wyatt and Steve and Ari and Andy Gardner. And I'm so proud of the biblical presentation that we gave on this highly emotional and even controversial issues of racial and economic justice. I hope you listened carefully to these messages and took notes. If you missed any of them, I want to encourage you to go back to our website or our app and make sure that you listen to these vital sermons. I want to take a minute right now to remind you of the intent behind this sermon series. In light of the divisive nature of race relations and arguments and discussions and protests, we felt like it was necessary, the pastors, that you are equipped to be able to think biblically and have conversations about these issues from a biblical perspective. And also we wanted to move all of us from being spectators to being advocates. Advocates for those who suffer injustice, whatever the color of their skin is or whatever their economic level. That was the goal. It was not politically motivated or informed, nor was it a defense of the Black Lives Matter liberal agenda. Not at all. But rather, it was totally 100% motivated by the Spirit of God that we as a church get into God's Word to learn God's heart for the marginalized, the disenfranchised, those unjustly treated, and the poor. Our key text was Micah 6:8. And what does the Lord require of you but to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before our God? And we learned that justice is not just punishing people for doing wrong, but the biblical meaning of this Hebrew word mishpat has the idea of giving people what is their due, whether it's punishment or protection or care. And to act justly, we're to do it in a merciful, gracious, loving manner, just as God himself. I love what Eugene Cho reminded us. He said, we do not worship justice, but we worship a just God. And therefore, we are to care about justice because God cares about justice. The call at the beginning of this sermon series and the call I have for us now is to walk humbly before our God, as Micah 6:8 calls us to. And this means learning and emulating the way that God thinks and acts towards other people, just as he does toward the poor and those who are unjustly treated, whoever that may be. So as a church, I want to remind you that God is calling us, and I'm calling us, to do a few things. Number one, to examine our heart and mind, to ask ourselves, are we really humbly willing to learn? Are we willing to listen to people's stories? Also, I think God's calling us to have empathy for those who are vulnerable, those who are oppressed, and those who are unjustly treated. We need to educate ourselves. We need to immerse ourselves in the scriptures. Go back through the sermon series and go through all these scriptures again and understand the heart of God and his call to walk justly and humbly before him. And then immerse yourself in good books. Generous Justice by Tim Keller is an excellent read. I've read that. And just while I was on vacation, I read Be the Bridge by Latasha Morrison. I encourage you to read those books. Next, engage. Form relationships with others. I really appreciate the way Ricky Jenkins put it. Open your heart and your home to those who do not look like you, those who do not act like you, and those who don't vote like you. And next, I want to encourage you to embrace the privileges, as our panel discussion talked about. Embrace the privileges that God has given each of us so that we can use those privileges to benefit and help the poor and the needy and those who don't have the same privileges that we do. I'm excited about this new sermon series we're beginning this Sunday on the book of Esther. We're titling it, Where is God? Esther's a strange book in the fact that God's name is never mentioned anywhere in this entire book. And yet, clearly, he's working behind the scenes, even when it's not obvious. Much like in our own lives, God is always at work, even though we may not see him. Due to this incredibly long pandemic, many of us have lost sight of God in our lives. Now, whether it's because of your weariness of the pandemic in general, or because of the complications of the pandemic in your life, whether how it's affected your work, whether you're working at home, or whether you're even working, or you're schooling for your children, your social life, and certainly your finances. All these has been impacted by this COVID pandemic. And oftentimes when we are in a long, dark tunnel, we really question, where is God in our life? So as we walk through this book of Esther over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be looking for where God is in Esther's life, so that it'll help us to be able to look in our own lives to find out where God is acting behind the scenes when we're not sure where he is. You will not want to miss a single message. God bless you, Alderwood. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. May he turn his face toward you and give you grace.